Hi, guys. Welcome to Real Food Recovery. We are super excited as we have a wonderful guest here today. But before I introduce them, I will actually say hello to Jamie and let her do the introduction. How you doing, girl?
Hi, very good. Very happy to have Dr. Wiss here with us. It is going to be a great conversation and a timely conversation in
Yeah.
the world we're living in today. This is being recorded in November, mid-November 2024. So here we go. Dr. David Wiss is a mental health scientist and registered dietitian nutritionist. He founded Nutrition and Recovery, which is a group practice based in Los Angeles, California, and also founded the Wise Mind Nutrition mobile app. And we're going to get to more about those in a second. As a clinician and researcher, Dr. Wiss has over a decade of experience working one-on-one with patients and has authored more than 20 peer-reviewed journal articles. Passionate about recovery for disordered eating, he is a pioneer in harm reduction approaches for ultra-processed food use disorders. Love it. Dr. Wiss is dedicated to being part of a solution to the mental health crisis, right? He understands that it's multifaceted. And you can find more about Dr. Wiss at drdavidwiss.com. And again, we're going to share a few more resources here later in the podcast that you can find Dr. Wiss on. All right. So Dr. Wiss, do you want to kick us off and tell us how you got where you are, your recovery story, your journey into clinical practice?
Sure. Yes. Thank you for having me. I love real food. I love recovery, and I love kindred spirits. So yeah, let's go. I have my own journey that I've been privileged to tell quite a bit. I'll give the briefest version. I'm from West Los Angeles. I'm a counterculture soul, a revolutionary, and I found myself in some mental health crises in my early 20s, health, physical health, mental health, social, spiritual health.
Yes.
And I hit a hard pivot, started my life over, and I got a pretty serious call toward nutrition as an avenue of healing for myself. I didn't have a nutritionist. No one told me, that it made a difference. This was now back in 2006. I just intuitively knew that there was a lot of actions that I could take that I hadn't taken. So picture me, background in Los Angeles urban culture, and here I am, 25 years old, and I'm walking in the aisle of the grocery store and looking at the BlackBerry like, oh my goodness, there's something there for me. So I had a profound change in my own journey. Nutrition, exercise, abstinence-based recovery from substance use disorder, going back to school, spirituality, meditation, sunlight, sleep, water, all the things. And I just transformed so rapidly. And I say so rapidly, but I really mean over the course of a year,
Sure.
which is pretty
That's
rapid
rapid, though.
in the life
Yeah,
course,
that's
right?
rapid.
Over the lifespan, right? Like to go
sure.
from where I was, pale skin, anxious, relational rupture left and right, to a place where I'm like, people feel safe around me. You know what I mean? It was a huge shift. And so I just listened to that and I pursued a career following it. I was working one-on-one with people with health, starting with exercise and then nutrition counseling, wanted to go back to school, did the online search. How do you become a nutritionist? And there's different paths. And there's this one particular path that seems to be accepted in the healthcare system. So I did the registered dietitian nutritionist route, had some conflict around it in school.
Oh, yeah.
Wasn't sure if I was in the right place, pushed back on professors, called out conflicts of interest, formed grassroots advocacy movements, was a total renegade from the beginning, even like starting in school. So this
Good
was
for
at the
you.
time when food addiction research was, really popping. And yeah, I felt like a little bit of an outcast in my program. And it wasn't just my thinking, it was also my gender. I didn't really fit in. And I did the best that I could. I crushed it. I got the best internship. I got straight A's, and I ended up, starting my own private practice immediately after finishing, which, was great. I I started Nutrition and Recovery back in 2012, started
Okay.
training other dietitians to work alongside me. And we started running groups in addiction treatment centers and bringing
Beautiful.
nutrition education to people in early recovery, started doing eating disorder informed care. And it really just took off to the point where eventually my practice was stable. I love doing writing and reading and presenting. So I went on to do a doctorate at UCLA after that.
Mhm.
Another tumultuous ride of me
Yeah.
not fitting into the department, pushing back on
Questioning the
mainstream
paradigms. Sure.
narratives. Yeah. And like, there's times when I think, oh God, I'm so proud of myself for, always questioning things. And there's other times where it's like, God, why can't you just get, why can't you just get along? Just like go with the flow. And I have, both of those things true. Anyways, I did finish my doctorate. I ended up getting into tech. I've built an app. I've got a pretty full life. And yeah, I'm very fortunate to combine, the tech work with the app, with the research that I still do, still writing papers, and then clinical work, and get to spend some time talking to lovely folks like y'all.
Excellent. Paige, I'll open it up with you. What questions do you have that you want to kick it off with, Dr. Wiss?
Something jumped out at me as you were talking about going through this big transformation, and how I love what you said about, you made this statement, people started feeling safe around me. And I thought, oh, wow, that's a monumental statement. And it made me think, people started feeling safe around you. Is that because you started feeling safe around you?
Great question. When I think about trauma recovery and healing work and anxiety, I think about all the different facets, right? Our own psychological processes, but also our biology as well. When I think about my journey, yeah, I had a spiritual awakening that revolutionized my life. Yes. And I started to feel safe in my internal world. But I really think about the healing process as, like the inflammation in my body, my nervous system. I was moving through life just detecting threats, right? Like having highs and lows and, right, not sleeping well. And something about the physical dimension of wellness really just bathed over my nervous system and helped me, you know what I mean? I became a good hug after that. You know what I mean? People, it was like, okay, I was a trustworthy individual, and I started to trust my own thinking. And I think that's what you're asking. I started to trust the process of my own life. And that really, really empowered me to be able to move through the world with grace and a whole different frequency.
Yes, I
Yeah.
think that's true. Very true. I love what you said about the journey through recovery is journey back to self-trust, which then earns trust of others. Paige, I'm sorry, step up. Go ahead.
No, that's literally, you said it eloquently. That's basically what I was gonna tie that connection to, is I feel like in Real Food Recovery that we talk a lot about self-trust, because if you can trust yourself, then you're automatically more calm, right? Because I know I'm gonna take care of myself. And let's say cravings come up, or you're in a situation where you're uncomfortable and you're feeling wobbly, you can always say, you know what, I know you've got the skills here. I'm gonna take care of you. You don't have to worry. And immediately that brings that blood flow back to the frontal lobe, and you're able to have access to that logic center and long-term consequences and everything that we are so fearful of. But I just think that that ultimate gift in recovery is that self-trust.
Yeah, the disorder is associated with self-doubt, and it makes sense because, we break so many contracts with ourselves, have so many reasons to doubt and to distrust. And I think what I've seen happen with people, and I've been very fortunate to work with a wide range of people, is that, when you get into recovery, whatever that looks like for the person, it's normal that for a while you would still go back to self-doubt, right? Because that is what the data suggests, right? If you have 7 years of doubting yourself and breaking those contracts and feeling disappointed, it might take a while for your brain to actually have a go-to of, no, you're safe, you're on the right path, you're making the right decision, there are no threats, there are no hurries, there are no worries, we're all good. There's no crises to be managed, right? To get to that place where you can truly, truly just be, sometimes it takes a long time.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
agree. Go
Well
ahead,
said.
Jamie.
No, this whole topic of self-trust and, moving from that place of fight or flight to that place of true calm frontal lobe access, it really reminds me of what in my like immature understanding of recovery when I first started, I realized that I was sort of, an adult child, an adult teenager, sort of walking around in an adult's body. And I was sort of had a mindset like a child or a young teenager would have about lots of things, including a lack of trust of myself. And a lack of really knowing who I was. And then as I matured in recovery and as I continued to heal and the inflammatory state in my body and brain started to come back to normal and my gut began to heal, I realized that I was moving into this sort of, loving adult parental self, right? And the more that Paige and I work with people, we're incorporating so much of that inner family work, whether it's formal internal family systems work or just the whole, concept of inner family or adult child healing, as a complement to the 12-step world that I have a background in as well. I think that that's so important to really understand that in recovery, we're becoming a version of our own adult loving self that is trustworthy and capable and compassionate and truly connected with all these different varied parts of us that are still there, even decades into recovery. They're still there, and it's important to accept all aspects of ourselves. So tell us what, Dr. Wiss, you learned in your as a leader of these groups, right? As you were working with these recovery groups, were they only substance recovery and then eventually leading you to eating disorders, or was it always eating disorder recovery groups?
No, I mean, one of the things you learn early on when you're in treatment settings is that, things cluster and co-occur, and there's people that are in different treatments for different reasons, right? The amount of people that I saw in substance use disorder treatment that had disordered eating, even clinically significant eating disorders, definitely caught my attention. There was also a feeling that a lot of these people were hiding it and didn't want to go to eating disorder treatment, had gone there and hated it and now was going this route for treatment instead of, right? So mental health is blurry, as we know. And but dietitians are sort of required in eating disorder treatment. So there's an industry there. There's training, there's jobs there. What I've done and what we've done is really try to bring nutrition to places where it wouldn't have otherwise existed, right? And say, hey, this is important for your patient population. And so I learned how to be very nuanced in my thinking, because there could be a day when I come in to run a group. These are the early days, 2013, 14, 15. I used to run like 2 groups a day, just all the different treatment centers running groups. And I really got incredible insight into, how much variability could exist in terms of the patient population and the need for nuanced messaging. So what I mean by that is I could have a group of people on one day and in one facility who all have just very poor nutrition, behavior, knowledge, access, and basically they all eat mostly junk food and need a message of, it's time to learn how to cook and eat real food and get fiber and heal your gut, heal your brain. Like, let's get serious about nutrition. But I could also walk into another treatment center at a different facility on a different day and realize that there's some people there that are, that know more about certain facets of nutrition than me, that have had an eating disorder for 10 years, right? And are looking for a nutritionist to endorse their path toward dieting and weight loss, right? There could be someone with a master's degree. So because I consider myself very sensitive, very attuned to my environment, I could walk into a room and pick up on this need to switch gears and maybe talk about things with different language or switch topics. And that's really what opened my mind to this idea of when someone has a single food philosophy and they just carry that wherever they go, inadvertently, there's going to be people that are confused or don't connect with it, or, you know, possibly are even harmed by it. So it really opened me up to this idea of multiple philosophies, you know, divergent views, right? Coming together. And I think it really, really helped me as a practitioner, because when I look at people, I don't say this is a diagnosis and this is a treatment. I really do look at people and be like, all right, there's a wide range of continuums here, right? There's some addiction like eating, there's some restriction, there's some depression, there's some gut issues, there's a need for this, and like seeing this big puzzle of a human system rather than a formula per se.
I love it. What you used in your overview, talked about, you know, recovery from disordered eating, and you talked about the ultra processed food use disorders. I am a huge believer that if somebody, you know, wants to self-refer or self-label themselves as, you know, a food addict or any kind of addict, right? That is up to them to label themselves. But I have in my awareness shifted away from using the term food addict, right? Or label food addict of anyone but me. Even I don't even like to label myself that for the most part, because I think it can be very harmful. So where do you sit on this idea of sort of these ultra processed food use disorders? Like I absolutely understand and believe in the addictive nature of these foods that are out there, certainly ultra processed foods, and I believe in addictive responses in our bodies and brains. But where do you stand here, and how do you educate people?
So I'm a clinician that looks at people, and I do one-on-one, but as we've talked about, I also do group work. So when you do group work, you start to see like larger effects. I also like to think about things on a public health level. So I've seen great benefit to looking at ultra processed food addiction, not just as a quote unquote diagnosis for a person that warrants a type of treatment, but more of a public health issue that has an effect on all of us, right? In various ways, and really thinking about it more as a social justice issue. So, you know, when it's time for me to work with someone or educate people in a group setting per se, I like to present the data on ultra processed food addiction as, you know, being important to understand the entire ecosystem of nutrition. And then I like for people to figure out where it connects with them. Some people connect with it, some people don't. So I've shifted away from classic nutrition education where I'm teaching people about calories and macronutrients and all that stuff. I think I'm not to say that if someone doesn't know that stuff, they shouldn't learn. They should absolutely learn. But we've operated under this assumption that, you know, people need more information, and it's information that's going to lead to behavior change. I believe that food addiction and ultra processed food addiction can be a part of the conversation around value-based eating, helping people eat in a way that aligns with their own personal value system. So, you know, for example, when I talk about ultra processed food addiction as a public health issue, sometimes people start to feel motivated to make changes because they don't want to eat in a way that supports multinational billion-dollar corporations who are polluting the environment, making food addictive, marketing it to vulnerable children, to people of low socioeconomic class. When I present it as a public health issue, I've noticed a lot of people are like, hey, wait a minute, this is BS. I don't like this, right? In an addiction treatment center, when I teach people that there are corporations that are making products more addictive and targeting them, you know, to this group. If you have any addiction history, you are more susceptible to buying a Monster it's an energy drink from a gas station, right? Yeah. And so instead of teaching someone, oh my God, there's all these harmful ingredients in this monster that you shouldn't drink. It's more about teaching someone, hey, this system is kind of set up for you to lose. And the corporations get to win, and they do so at the expense of public health. Do you feel upset in any way? Do you want to support the system that already is, or do you want to break free? So value-based eating helps people eat in ways that are aligned with issues that are already important to them. Not everyone cares about the environment. Not everyone cares about corporate power. I certainly didn't when I was newly sober. I was still flicking cigarettes on the ground, if you know what I mean.
I get you.
Yeah, it took me a while. But yeah, I think the ultra processed food addiction conversation is important because not everyone meets full criteria. Some people are just somewhere on the spectrum. And when you get this kind of idea that, yeah, the human brain is changing, we're more susceptible to addiction-like processes, and food is one of them. If you want to experience real joy, you probably have to give your dopamine system a little bit of a break. And the environment is not set up for you to do that. If you want to access real joy, you got to work really hard to sort of opt out of the system. And that's where getting into nutrition becomes an avenue toward inner peace and toward recovery. And I think I've gotten some pretty good buy-in from folks, as opposed to the classic food addiction models of like, you got to look at the ingredients and you got to count the grams and you got to do the thing. There's enough of that in the world. I try to be a little bit more nuanced and open-hearted, open-minded, etc.
Yeah. You talk a lot about mental health issues and the connection that it has to the effects of ultra processed food. And I'm wondering if you have an opinion, which one comes first? Or is it the chicken and the egg where they just work together? And a second part of that question is, what do you address first? Where does someone start?
So in public health, epidemiology, we think about, the kind of impact of various risk factors across the life course, right? I spent a lot of time drawing models with arrows, right, to answer these questions of which comes first. When you do cross-sectional research, you don't get to know which one comes first. And, fortunately, in the last few years, we've had some really good longitudinal data that suggests that, regular consumption of ultra-processed food contributes to the development of different mental health conditions, disorders, depression being the most commonly cited in the literature. There's data for anxiety, ADHD, etc. But the data supporting the role of nutrition in depression is pretty convincing because it's dose response, it's longitudinal, it's dose response, right? It's a very clear picture. And we also have several randomized controlled trials showing that reducing ultra-processed food improves depression. So now it goes in the opposite direction, right? But I think your argument is valid. A lot of people say, well, they're eating ultra-processed foods because they're depressed. Sure, it's bidirectional. That definitely is the case. But, if someone grows up eating real food and they have a lot of positive, resilient health behaviors, and they develop depression and then pivot towards like addiction, like eating ultra processed food, that could be a different case. Yeah, but most people are just exposed to ultra processed foods at such a high level. So it's hard to find those types of cases.
Yeah. Where do they start? People that maybe are suffering from both, which usually they work in tandem. What do they address first? Where do they start?
I mean, it all depends on resources, where someone's at. I mean,
Good
one
point.
could make the case that like starting with the food is a low-hanging fruit. Like you can change the way you eat like today. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like let's not mess around and let's get busy in the kitchen. Let's go to the grocery store. Let's make dinner tonight. You know what I mean? Like let's let's do it. And then, of course, there are other arguments. Like if someone's in serious life distress and going through a lot, I've worked with clients and patients over the years that are in tricky transitional periods in their life. And, the conclusion is like, all right, that's too much change for right now. Let's just do something really, really little for this week or this month. Let's just change what you drink, or change what time you go to bed at night. Let's make little changes, and then, bigger ones become more accessible. So I'm a fan of meeting people where they're at. Some people are ready for really drastic nutrition intervention. Sometimes people are too ready and have to slow them down. You know what I mean? They want to do everything in starting Monday, yeah. So, but I believe in holistic treatment. I never try to oversell nutrition as being the end all be all, right? People need to do other healing work. I like to call it lifestyle medicine, right? Which captures all the different facets of health and sleep, sunlight, all the things that were helpful to me.
Mm, well said. I want to pivot to, since again, we are sitting here in the end of the year in 2024, post a national election. And I want to pivot to a topic that is linked to the election, but is in no way affiliated with any specific party, because I think it's way, way bigger than any party affiliation in the US. But that is the whole movement around making America healthy again. This movement is really, I think, a central theme of the changes that we're seeing in America that are sorely needed and have been asked for. And the future or incoming, I guess, administration is putting plans in place to bring a lot of change to the way that our country runs on food and how we manufacture it, how we market it, how we recommend it. Where do you stand, Dr. Wiss, in the MAHA movement, and how are you looking to link yourself to it?
Yeah, so I always felt out of place in my educational journey. I shared that with you. I detected a lot of conflicts of interest. Like I said, we formed groups. The first real movement I was a part of was called Dietitians for Professional Integrity. And we were like designed to whistleblow and call out, conflicts of interest at our annual meeting. There were speakers who worked for industry and webinars we received. And that gave me like a tremendous sense of purpose in my life. I felt like I was making a real difference, challenging the status quo, trying to bring about systemic change. And we did. We actually changed the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, right?
Oh, wow. Amazing.
They ended up changing their policies around disclosure, about sponsorship. They removed their sponsored sessions into a separate track. There was a lot of things that happened. Our group kind of like self-funded, like ran out of resources. We were exhausted. 4 years later, the group disbanded, and some of the progress remained, but the academy kind of went about its ways and still stayed closely aligned to corporate interests. I think the language that we use in the MAHA movement is that it's been captured.
Yes.
There has been outside influence infiltrating the board of directors. There's donations. There's a wide range of ways in which commercial actors influence institutions. And that is definitely the playbook. And, I've spent my whole career studying the commercial determinants of health. These are all the different ways in which entities, commercial actors, multinational corporations tend to shape norms, control the narratives, and basically use their money and influence to kind of win, right? And they do. And they do consistently because they have deep pockets and they have really good data and they have really smart people and they have PR firms and they just stay one step ahead of the game, detecting the temperature predicting
right.
the weather, if you know what I mean. And so maybe it's my own trauma history or my addiction history, but I've had an antenna that just detects conflicts of interest, like
Totally.
more than most people, right? Like I see it through election cycles. I see it through, pharmaceutical, food, agricultural industries. My spirit has always felt unsettled knowing that these things go on. And so when I, first heard Robert F. Kennedy Jr. sharing about these things, I had a chance to meet the guy. It was like 100% in alignment with everything that I had been saying for 10 years. He
Love it.
also talked about creating wellness farms for people in substance use disorder recovery. So this was one of the initiatives of like creating space in rural areas where people without needing to pay astronomical fees could go and put their feet in the dirt and learn how to grow food and cook food and get a chance to connect to nature and have communal experiences with food. And like that completely matched my own personal experience with recovery. So when I started, hearing this, it felt very much like something that I should support. And I have supported it, since before MAHA was even formed, right? I've been a voice in this area and, I'm excited. There's a lot of pushback for reasons that you have mentioned for, bipartisan political reasons. But one of the things I've noticed is that a lot of my colleagues, dietitians, are presenting now in the last week as very anti-MAHA. And it makes sense to me why, because when they had their meeting at the Senate, the roundtable, there was no dietitians, right? Like dietitians are supposed to be
That's true.
America's,
That was
America's nutrition
Interesting.
experts, but like being systematically excluded from this conversation. And I think part of that reason is because dietitians have a terrible reputation of being in bed with the food industry.
Yeah, they've been
That
bought.
you
Well,
can't really
their curriculum's been
trust
bought.
dietitians, right?
Mhm.
And so, yeah, in my opinion, the public perception of dietitian is at an all-time low, very as evidenced by, right, like not being sort of invited to the movement. And so I've gotten some pushback from dietitians. They're like, how can you support this? This is pseudoscience. This is quackery, right? Yada, yada, yada. There's no dietitians. The guy's not even a doctor. But like what I connect with is the revolutionary part of it. Let's turn the system upside down. Let's get corrupt actors out of Washington. Let's end the revolving door between industry and the regulatory agencies. And I believe that that is the only real hope for our field. I'm not going to go marching for policies. You know how many years I've seen people spending effort. Let's get insurance coverage. Let's change the school lunch program. Let's get this. I've been in the field 13 years. I've never seen anything significant happen. I personally have advocated for grants for nutrition education in addiction treatments. I've worked with the public health organizations. I actually even did some presentations in the California prison system trying to get better food for inmates. And like everything gets really close. People like it. They're like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. Everything gets really close to materializing. And then for some reason, it always gets squashed. There's always some, counter argument or, conflicting industry per se. And so I've almost given up trying to make systemic change in nutrition because of these commercial determinants of health. And I actually see the MAHA movement as being critical to, the next chapter of health for our nation, because until we can mitigate these corporate conflicts and this real kind of dark behind the scenes, follow the money story, right? I think we're going to be stuck. So I'm here for it. I was, nominated on the MAHA Now website. I'm hoping to make a difference. Part of what I offer, which I think is unique, is that I am a dietitian. in addition to being a mental health scientist. So I understand my field and the mindset and how to, like, you know, reach other professionals. So I think one of the things that at least I pride myself in is being able to message information about ultra processed foods, about obesity or living in a larger body in ways that are very safe, not triggering, and sensitive to the marginalized groups, because there's a lot of pushback to conversations that, you know, we are having because people feel like it's not sensitive to certain types of groups, and very sensitive to all the needs of the different groups. And I think that if we are going to come out in public health and put out some messaging around food, that we also need to be careful not to be overly charged and trigger people, right? Like we definitely see rises in restrictive eating disorders, orthorexic tendencies, and I guess I'm one of the few people that knows both of those worlds really well. And I really just want to be the guy to bridge the gap, to be the guy in the middle, to say, we know how to satisfy this group. We know how to, you know, get this message out. We know how to say the truth without being controversial, etc. So hopefully that's my gift to the world, to bring, you know, eating disorder informed public health messaging that will disrupt the status quo in the nutrition field and the healthcare field as a whole.
Love it.
I love what you said, the point about dietitians not being happy that they weren't invited to the Senate hearing. And I was thinking, but is it really that necessary? I mean, this is not a complicated thing. The message, the overarching message is just eat single ingredient, non-processed food. I don't know. Do we need to talk more? I mean, is there more? Is there more to it than that? For example, we have people asking us, you know, what kind of food plan should we follow? You know, what diet's the best? And Jamie and I always go back to, we're a big proponent of, the answer to that is eat single ingredient, non-processed food. And every person is individualized and what may work for, whether it's vegan or Mediterranean or whatever. Just, there's more than one way to skin a cat, but just sticking to the single ingredient, non-processed food should get you to where you're going. No matter if you're high carb, low carb, whatever.
I don't disagree. And I think it's just important to remember that there's counter arguments for everything. There's someone that's going to say, what about the single mom with 3 kids who's on food stamps, right? Like there's always an argument against that. Like, what about, right, the need for shelf stability in institutional settings? Like, are we serving single ingredient food at the VA hospital? Right? Like there's just, dietitians are like trained to think in a way that's pro-industry and defends the systematic sort of issues that are at play. So I understand why a lot of the dietitians are like, well, you know, this ingredient isn't that bad just because you can't pronounce it. Like, you know, and so there's just a really like obvious kind of counterpoint that ends up happening. And, you know, my view is that that's what the industries want, is us to be fighting amongst ourselves over social issues and about whether or not this ingredient, right, when they're able to just continue with their playbook and laughing to the bank.
Distract from the issue at hand.
Awesome.
I had one more question, but Jamie, you go ahead if you.
No, go ahead and ask it, and then I'll make sure we cover Dr. Wiss's different ventures.
And yeah, and this is probably a good place to end with this question of, for those that are listening, do you have some like key habits or behaviors for long-term success in ultra processed food recovery journey? Something, nuggets that they could take away that would really help them, because I think success is built around those long-term habits. So
I do. Yeah. I've worked with a lot of people over the years, in the thousands. And one of the patterns that I've kind of seen is sometimes people that have body dissatisfaction and disordered eating and have a ruptured relationship with food, when they're really uncomfortable in their body, there's a natural uncomfort that comes with food. And so there's I think a natural negative charge. I think a lot of people, their narrative is that like, I don't like food. And so like things like cooking, right, are aversive, right? They believe that they should be eating less food. The food is the problem, and that like they don't connect to food. They hate it, right? They're upset about it, right? And I just haven't seen that framework, mentality work well for people. Generally, my view is that if you want to heal, recover, that you kind of got to fall in love with food in a new way, right? I don't think that there's a really good shot if you can't like be able to walk the grocery store and start to experience some excitement or joy for this amazing food that you get to eat. I have people that it's interesting, and I know that it's a trauma response from their lived experience. They'll come to me and say, I've done everything. I've spent all my money over the years. I've seen 20 functional medicine doctors and dietitians. I'm willing to do anything to heal. And then when I ask them to cook a meal, they can't, right?
Yeah.
And so you wonder, like, what is this barrier? There's something, they're like, I just, I want a meal delivery service, that sort of thing. So I'm just a big believer in doing the necessary healing work to connect to food so that you can cook and clean. A lot of people don't like to clean. So you can, and I'm not saying you have to cook all your own meals. I'm just saying you have to feel safe with food. You have to connect to it. There has to be some positive emotions that come around it. There has to be some joy. You should be able to go to the grocery store and pick out a colorful bell pepper and bond with it a little bit and be able to take it home and prep it at some point and have it land on you and feel like you're doing something, to support not just physical health, but mental health and spiritual health. I do think that when people look at food as a reductionistic, calories, macronutrients, it just needs to be 2/3 of a cup, you weigh and measure, stuff like that. I don't see people doing the necessary healing work to really have what I call sustainable recovery. So yeah, I guess I could offer listeners, um, it feels like food is the problem in your life, but really, I think that to get into recovery, we have to look at food as like the solution to your problems. The solution is in eating. It's not in not eating. It's actually in eating. It's just eating differently, eating the right foods, and learning how to eat foods that you enjoy and that also love you back.
I love
I,
that.
I, I love
So-
that. Love your food.
So in our last minute, I just wanted to give you an opportunity, Dr. Wiss, to just cover your app. It's called Wise Mind Nutrition. It is available on the Apple Store and the Google Play Store. Anything you want to share there for listeners?
Yeah, I built it, as a reflection and extension of my years of work with eating disorders and also addictions and food addiction, just as a way to honor the fact that there's a lot of different paths to recovery, and that the way we think about food, the way we think about our body, the language we use is all somewhat unique. So I built an app that would encourage someone to do some of their own digging. So it's filled with educational modules, but also assignments and reflections. There's a food journal, there's nightly reviews, which is something we do in recovery to just look back at your day. And so it's more than a food logging app. There's an incredible food log in there, but it's also a recovery journey. There's meditations, there's cooking, classes, recipes. It's very, very comprehensive. And it's data driven. So when you answer questions, the app learns a little bit about you and is able to offer some personalized messaging. It's designed for people that have anxiety, depression, disordered eating, any sort of addiction, ADHD, gut issues. And the whole idea is you got to do a little bit of the work, and you got to put in a little bit of effort. Like I think a lot of apps on the marketplace are like, oh, we're just going to make your life easy and we're going to solve this problem for you. I'm kind of saying, no, I want to make your life easy. Yes. But if you want to heal your ruptured relationship with food, it's going to take some work. So like, let's spend 15 minutes a day. Let's do the journaling. Let's share, like, let's put in the necessary work so that you never need to seek nutrition related treatment again. So it works really well for people who are ready and they're at that level of that readiness for change.
Love it. Yes, yes. Self-reflection, I think what your app drives, it sounds like is a really, really deep relationship with self, and or at least an understanding and awareness first, and then a relationship builds over time. And it's part of the work, right? Because so many of us and we'll try to sort of it's like whack-a-mole, right? We'll hit it over here with the food, or over here with the sleep, or over here with the, you know, other behaviors, but we won't look at the relationship we have with ourselves. So thank you so much, Dr. Wiss, for your time today. It's been wonderful. Where can viewers and listeners find out more about you? What website do you want to?
Yes, I have a couple. I also want to add that the Wise Mind Nutrition app was built so that practitioners could follow their clients on it. So anyone who's a coach or nutritionist, therapist can support your clients, check out their journaling, etc. wisemindnutrition.com is the app, but I also have about 90 something blogs there at the intersection of nutrition and mental health. So really good resources, downloadable stuff. My private practice website is nutritioninrecovery.com. And that's my clinical site. And then I have a homepage on the internet, which is drdavidwiss.com, where I house a lot of my research papers and webinars and podcasts and things of that nature. Social media, of course, Dr. David Wiss. I have Wise Mind Nutrition on TikTok, YouTube, all the things.
Thank you for being with us today. I hope you'll come back and visit us again sometime.
Yeah, I appreciate you both and your show, and congratulations, and to be continued.
Thanks.
Thank
And if
you.
you want to find out, go ahead.
We'll make sure everything is linked that you just talked about. We'll make sure everything is linked in our show notes as well.
Perfect. And if you want to find out more about us, you can find us at Real Food Recovery for You. That's the number 4 and the letter U. Until next time, guys. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.